from Sydney, Australia. It's the Sports Tipper Podcast.
That'd be great.
Where we're talking all things sports and racing because it's our mission to get you more winners. Now here's your host, John and Bec.
Today on episode 1 of the Sports Tipper podcast, John's covering week 1 of the AFL final series, and I'll be chatting to you about 2 cracking races coming up on Saturday. The Dato Tan Chin Nam Stakes at the Valley, along with the Theo Marks Stakes at Rose Hill. So let's get stuck in, John.
Thanks, Bec. So let's get underway. So game 1 tonight, Richmond v Hawthorn at the MCG at 7:20. This is the first qualifying final. Obviously this is huge because whoever wins this gets the week off and goes straight through to the prelim. So, current bet easy odds. Richmond at $1.40, Hawthorn juicy outsiders at $3. Last time they met, Richmond got home 102-89, all the way back in round 3. Richmond had a big lead going into the 4th, and Hawthorn kicked a few goals late to make it a bit of an acceptable score. So, some of the keys to the game. Everyone's racking their brain on how to try and beat Richmond, what theory they've got. Popular ones to kick more, handball less, and rack up uncontested marks. This is basically, of course, how Hawthorn plays. They've played this way since Clarkson took over. So it could be the perfect storm. I'm thinking in the final, Hawthorn's going to have to play daring and attacking footy. They're not going to win a game against Richmond that's in the 60s, 70s. Hawthorn, I'm feeling, is going to need to score in the 80s or the 90s to have a realistic chance. Richmond's too well drilled, too much pressure. Rance and Hawley up the back. Rance runs the show. We all know, controls it. So I'm guessing Hawthorn's going to have to play a bit more daring. There was a few interesting ins for Hawthorn. So Frawley's back, which is huge, which we assume he'll play on Rewalt. Sicily's back as well in the back line, which will be fantastic for the Hawks. A bit of a general as well, if he can stay from getting angry, as we've seen. And the interesting one, so Hawthorn's going to play 2 ruckmen. So Segler and McAvoy are going to play. Not sure. I'm guessing Clarkson's thinking that he's going to have a guy, one of the ruckmen's going to play in the back line to clog up from Rewalt and Caddy and others from getting a run at the ball. In turn, I'm guessing, one, obviously, of course, and on the flip side, one's going to play in the forward line. Not sure how this is going to work against the Richmond guys. They're all small. They're all fast. Hawthorn should win the ruck war. Obviously, without Nankervis, Grig's going to be the one for Richmond, and he's really undersized. Tommy Mitchell. So last time he played, when he played Richmond earlier in the season, he had 42 disposals and 11 clearances. It's a bit of a stock standard week for Mitchell this year, as we all know, and we've got him in the Brownlow. But you would assume they could tag Richmond. They could go with Cochin or a Graham or even a Prestia. Not sure if they will at the start of the game. I'm guessing Hardwick's probably going to get a bit of a feel out and see how the game's going first before he makes the decision to tag and obviously the score. It's if Mitchell has his, we've seen Mitchell have a 25-30 possession first half, then I think they might shut him down. It all depends how effective the possessions are. A lot of the possessions with Mitchell, like McRae from Western Bulldogs, like with Gaff before he had his brain explosion, a lot of them aren't really effective possessions. There's a little bit of kicking, a little bit of marking, so I'm guessing we'll see how we go on that one. So, fantasy-wise, I'd look for Dusty to have a big game. I'd look for Presti to have a big game. Lambert should rack up a fair few tackles. In the backs, Hooley usually goes well. He should go well for the Tigers. On the flip side for the Hawks, I'm not sure. Mitchell's always ridiculous. I think he's in the 120s for the fantasy, so I'm not sure. I mean, he'll probably get there, but I think other options will be a bit stronger. I'd be having a look at guys like Liam Shields. He's always good. He always performs well. O'Meara, he's got the test tonight, first final. Can he stand up to the pressure? Guys like Isaac Smith, even Bruce. Bruce is playing well. He's basically the whole forward line with Roughhead not doing a lot. So they're probably the picks. Overall in the game, I'm tipping Richmond to win by 12 points. Should be close no matter what, 1-39 either way. I can't see either team belting the other team. It should be... I hope it's not too much of a shutdown game. Hopefully it's free-flowing and a bit scoring-wise. Hopefully it's in the the 80s and the 90s. Should be a great way to start off the final. So Richmond hopefully can get the win and get the week off and go through to the prelim at the MCG. So that's game 1. Okay, so let's talk about game 2. So game 2 is tomorrow night on Friday at the MCG at 7:50. It's the first elimination final. We've got Melbourne taking on Geelong. The current odds on BetEasy, Melbourne's slight favourites at 275, Geelong the outsiders at 210. They've met twice this season, both thrillers. Round 1 was Geelong getting home 97-94, after we can all remember Max Gawn missed a kick from about 30 metres out and missed by a long way. In the round 18 game, Geelong won 100-98. Melbourne had control of this the whole way, and Tui kicked a goal after the siren for Geelong to get the win. There could be a hangover after this for Melbourne. This is the game that's worrying me this game. So we're going to have to talk about some of the keys. So Dangerfield, I'm thinking this is going to be a big breakout game for Dangerfield. He's had many before. I think he's going to take control of this one, especially for Geelong. Their forward line for Geelong, besides Hawkins having the career year that he's had, and he's had to get Geelong just into the finals, they struggle to score. They've got Menzel. They've got a couple of other guys who are a bit of a makeshift forward. Even Harry Taylor's played up there. But unless they're going to need Hawkins to kick probably 5 to have a chance, and then obviously Dangerfield, I get the feeling that with Ablett, with the midfield, the strong midfield Geelong's got, they're going to put Dangerfield up forward, and I think he's going to have a pretty big game. Melbourne's one that is the highest scoring team in the comp. On the flip side, Geelong's the best defensive team in the comp. Not sure which way this is going to go. This is such a toss of the coin, this game. Melbourne at the G obviously helps. Geelong, in my opinion, don't seem to play the G well. They struggle against Hawthorn. They got close to Richmond a few weeks ago, but not too sure. The big concern for Melbourne is, are they going to be the deer in the headlights? They haven't been there for 12 years. They're coming in awesome form. They've beaten West Coast. They've beaten GWS. But is the occasion going to be too big for Melbourne? Melbourne has a lot of players that are very similar to Richmond. Melbourne's, Viney looks like he's going to come back. We haven't got the teams named yet, so we're not sure. But they've got a lot of players who are very similar. Jones, Viney, Neil Bullen, Petrarca. They've got a lot of guys who can play mid, but can also go forward. So we're going to have to see what happens with Hogan obviously being out. It's going to be a lot of pressure on Tom McDonald to kick 5. Not sure whether he can against the Geelong defence, but Melbourne is fully equipped to have guys who can pop up and kick a couple of goals. I'm thinking the selection in the game, I'm thinking that Melbourne, I want to see them get home. I think they will scrape home. Dangerfield, like I said, it's a huge concern. They should be able to keep Ablett and Selwood enough under wraps, and Duncan. But I'm tipping Melbourne to win by 8 points. I'm thinking that their scoring just might be a bit too much for Geelong. In the fantasy, obviously Dangerfield, I think he's just over 100. I suggest to jump on that because unless there's bad weather heading there, he should have a really, really big game. For Melbourne, I'd be looking at guys. Gawn, I think he'll have a big game for Melbourne. Also, guys like who come out of the back line. They've got a lot of mids. Oliver should go big. He's a tackling machine. Not sure whether Geelong will tag him, but he's pretty much a guaranteed 100 with like Brayshaw every week. The other guys for Geelong, Duncan's always a good thing. Menagola's always a pretty good thing as well. They're always around the 100 there, what their fantasy line is. So yeah, we're thinking this is the one game where I'm torn of who to pick. Hoping and thinking Melbourne can get the job done. So we'll see how they go. Hopefully Melbourne can knock them out and win their first final for a very, very long time. Okay, so we're going to jump into Game 3. We've got the Swans taking on the Giants in the second elimination final at the SCG on Saturday at 4:20. Current odds on BetEasy have got the Swans at favourites at $1.72 and GWS at the outsiders at $2.15. They've met twice this year with the Swans getting the win both times. In round 3, Sydney won 103-87. In round 22, only a few weeks back, Sydney got the win 80-60 after GWS led at half time. Some of the keys to the game. So the teams haven't been named yet, but we're assuming that Franklin and Parker will play. There's been some talk about Reed. I don't think he's going to come up, but obviously with Franklin and Parker back, that's huge for the Swans. We saw when the Swans went down to Hawthorn narrowly that the Swans, when they have the makeshift forward line, the unpredictability really works for them. I hope that when Franklin, if he does play, they don't become buddy conscious like they do sometimes, and it's just non-stop kicking to Franklin. They've got other weapons up forward, so hopefully they do use them. For the GWS, Toby Green, if he plays, him and Cameron pretty much are the forward line. Himmelberg hasn't been bad. GWS have got a lot of guys who can chip in and a couple of mids that can kick goals, Kelly and Canelio and stuff. So that's going to be interesting to see how that goes. Lockie Whitfield's a guy that the Swans are going to have to keep quiet. He runs free from the back line. We all know about the orange tsunami. If that gets going with the Swans guys, with their mids, with the older legs, with Kennedy, with Parker, with Hanbury, they could struggle, the Swans, against GWS. Obviously, being on the SCG on the small ground is going to help with the Swans having the final there. So we'll have to see how that one plays out. With fantasy, it's always tough. Kennedy and Parker are always a good thing. Kennedy, these are the games where he stands up. He'll have a heap of possessions. He'll have a heap of tackles. Not sure with Parker with the injury how he'll come up. He'll always give the 100%. For GWS, Kelly should go big. We'd assume Canelio. These are guys who are pretty much the automatic 100. I'd stay away from Green on the small ground. I'm not sure since he's came back. Even though he went back out again, he hasn't looked the same. Doesn't look like he's match fit. So probably Kennedy'd be the one that I'd take. The backs for the Hawks, Rampy actually goes all right if anyone's looking at a backman. There's not really a lot on offer besides that. It's mostly going to be a guy from the midfield that you take. Prediction in the game. So I've got the Swans to win by 13. They seem to have GWS as a number at the moment. I'm not convinced. Obviously, with Franklin and Parker, if they play, confident in that. If not sure. It's definitely a toss of the coin match. The experience should get Sydney home, being at the SCG, even though they haven't played well this year. It should help. Obviously, it's harder, as I said, with the teams not being named. We assume we can't see Franklin and Parker missing. Everybody wants, and even I didn't think there'd be talk of Reed, but they've got talk of Reed coming back as well to put him in the forwards. So hopefully Sydney can get the job done for us Swans fans, and they can move on to next week. So in the last game of the first week of the finals, we've got West Coast taking on Collingwood on Saturday night over in Perth in the second qualifying final. So the current odds on BetEasy, West Coast are the favourites at $1.57. Collingwood, the outsiders, at $2.45. They played only a few weeks back, round 17. West Coast got the win at the G, which was a bit surprising. They won 102-67. They blew. It was pretty much a close game the whole way through, and West Coast blew them out in the last quarter. So some of the keys to the game. It looks as though, again, teams haven't been named yet, but it looks Kennedy and Darling are a bit of a guaranteed thing for West Coast to come back. It's huge having these two guys back. Both big guys, both big monsters. They've got Rioli, they've got Cripps, they've got Lacroix, they've got the small guys who can feed off these guys as well. West Coast is the best thing about West Coast is their forward line when they've got everybody up and running. On the flip side, Collingwood, the forward line, they've got DeGoey, he's emerging, he's getting better every week. They throw Mason Cox up there. They've got a couple of young guys. Not convinced on Collingwood's forward line. The plus side is for them that West Coast doesn't have a strong back line besides McGovern, but obviously he can't take intercept marks everywhere. The Collingwood's big chance in the game is with the mids, with side bottom. Treloar is supposed to be back. They've got Pendlebury. They've got Adams. It's pretty much one of the best mids in the comp. West Coast, of course, are missing Gaff. They've got strong guys. They've got Redden. They've got Shuey. Not guys who are going to break the game open, but they're more shutdown players. So that will be Collingwood's biggest chance, obviously. They've got to dominate in the mids. They've got Grundy, who should have a big game, obviously, with no Nat Nui. And obviously, if Treloar comes back on the bigger ground, if they can get him running freely, that is their best chance. For the fantasy points, Collingwood mids. Adams has been going off. He's been getting a lot of tackles. We've done well with him. Pendlebury, he's a bit up and down. Side bottom will be he always racks up the points on the big ground. De Goey as well, you'd assume that he's going to kick the bulk of their scores. And Grundy's always a good thing as well. For West Coast, guys like Shen and Hearn, they move the ball into the back line. Cripps is playing really well. There's not a lot. I'm always hesitant to pick forwards because obviously they need to kick goals. Guys like Darling and Kennedy, if they do both play, because they don't rack up a lot of possessions, they need to kick a bag of goals. They need to kick the 4, 5 or 6 to get the decent amount of points. So I'd probably just stick with the Collingwood guys for the game. Prediction-wise, this is probably the most straightforward one. I assume that predict that West Coast will win. I've got them to win by 17 points over there, and with, like I said, Collingwood's forward line is the biggest concern. They're strong everywhere else. House should be back as well for Collingwood in the backs, which will make them strong. But they're just, I don't know how they're going to score. It's kind of like the Sydney makeshift forward line against Hawthorn. The unpredictability is Collingwood's biggest strength because no one knows where it's going to come from. The scores besides De Goey. If they can get Cox up there, if he can take a couple, obviously with the size of him, if he can kick a few, that will help them. But yeah, thinking West Coast are going to get the win here, they'll get the week off and they'll host the prelim again over in Perth. Should be a good game. Should be a big crowd. Collingwood travels well if they let their guys have some tickets. So yeah, that covers the 4 games, guys. Should be a big week. Really looking forward to. If I can pick the games, I'm really looking forward to. Even though I'm a Swans man, I want to see what Melbourne can serve up against Geelong. Picking Melbourne, Dangerfield scares the absolute crap out of me. I have a feeling that this is going to be one of those defining games where you're going to look back and say, "My God, he had a blinder in that game." Melbourne like I said, they should win. The struggle with Geelong is to score, but that's the game that I want to see the most, even more than the Swans game. Hopefully the Swans, they've frustrated us all year. They've cost us that many perfect rounds. We'll pick them, they'll lose. I'm still getting over the fact they lost against Gold Coast at home. And then, they'll go to Geelong and beat Geelong. They'll win they went to Melbourne a few weeks back to the G and beat Melbourne. They'll win all the games that we don't expect them to, and yeah, they should win there. So we should see hopefully Richmond progress. We should see Melbourne hopefully progress. Should see the Swans get through, and West Coast should obviously get through to the prelim as well and get a week off. So good luck, guys.
Awesome. Thanks for that rundown of the AFL finals, John. Now on to this Saturday's racing. I've picked 2 top races to have a look at. The first being the Dato 10 Chin Nam Stakes. This is a tidy Group 3 weight for age over 1,600 metres at Moonee Valley, marked for race 8 with the winner securing their spot in the Cox Plate. Night's Watch has to be the one of interest here. With a sensational win last Saturday at Caulfield, he was super impressive late, and the mile could suit here. Weir loves to back his runners up quickly, and Night's Watch is no exception. Hartnell could be the trouble for Night's Watch though. With Williams on board and 7 placings from 10 at the mile, he only just missed grabbing the win last start in the PB Lawrence. Bonneval resumes on Saturday from a lengthy break and took the win here last year, so I'll be shocked if she isn't in the mix, along with Odeon around the minors. The next is the Theo Marks Group 2 over 1,300 set for race 5 at Rose Hill. What a battle this should be in this tight field. Resuming on Saturday, Trapeze Artist comes in with a heavier weight chasing a hat trick with blinkers on. D'Argento hits a little in front for me though. Hugh Bowman's on board, a touch lighter than the 3rd place run last outing against Winks. Waller has him looking great in this prep and will be stunned if he doesn't grab the chocolates over Trapeze Artist. But the one to watch here for a sneaky look in is Siege of Quebec. A nice finish first run back after an awkward start at Randwick on the 18th, and this trip will suit with Tommy Berry on board. Now good luck if you're having a punt on Saturday, but as always be cautious when wagering at Moonee Valley. It's renowned for throwing in those rough winners. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast, as our next episode will see John covering the big question, MJ and LeBron, who is the GOAT? Now gamble responsibly and remember, please don't follow your heart, follow the sports tipper.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Sports Tippers Podcast. It's our mission to get you more winners, so make sure you head over to our site at thesportstipper.com to grab all of our free sport and racing tips.
Play our game. All right? Play hard, but stay poised. Finish it!